What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Tomatoito Boxing Show. And we are just days removed from what was a jam-packed, impressive, great overall weekend for the sport of boxing. A lot of action, and it all kicked off Friday evening out in Glendale, Arizona, with the main event of Oscar Valdez and Liam Wilson, a top-ranked promoted card, where every time that they show up to Phoenix, regardless of the promoter, anytime they show up to Phoenix, the crowd comes out in droves, and they represent. And boxing is amazing. That scene out in Phoenix, Arizona, and out in the surrounding areas of Phoenix. It's awesome. It's awesome whenever there's a fight card that's coming to town, even if it's that for UFC, even bigger numbers at that. The arena was insane for Oscar Valdez and Liam Wilson. The co-main event, of course, was Seniesa Estrada versus Yokasta Valle, and a lot more talent that was featured on this card. Up-and-coming talent, prospects who are just knocking on the door of contendership, title contendership in their respective divisions. And we'll go ahead and break them down. Of course, the main event was Oscar Valdez versus Liam Wilson. Liam Wilson, who was coming off he had two fights in between his last outing with Emmanuel Navarrete, where it seemed that as if he had done enough to had stopped Navarrete, and that he had received a longer than usual count by the referee, where Navarrete answered the count and came back and later stopped Liam Wilson in that fight, where Liam Wilson thought that he should have been crowned the rightful winner prior to his getting stopped by Vaquero. Nonetheless, Vaquero pulled off the job. Liam Wilson went on a 2-fight win streak and then came back to fight Oscar Valdez. And if I remember correctly, it was in the very same arena as where he fought Emmanuel Navarrete. He ended up finding Carlos Maria Alanis and Jackson John England, not the echelon. So he definitely dropped a couple levels in opposition to stay busy, to continue working on his craft, continue getting on his winning ways in order to build up for this fight with Oscar Valdez. The stakes were elevated as the week proceeded. As the WBO announced, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday leading to this Friday main event, that the WBO was going to be sanctioning this fight after all getting throwing their belt into the line, their interim version for the 130-pound division. And the reason they're doing so is because Emmanuel Navarrete, who is the current WBO champ at 130 pounds, is going to be moving up a division, challenging for the WBO's lightweight title against Denis Berinchik. That's going to happen sometime in mid-May. So if he does that, and if he's successful against Berinchik, wins the lightweight title, more likely than not, Navarrete will begin campaigning at 135, and the WBO didn't want to stay without a champion at 130, so they ended up throwing their belt into the mix for this fight between Valdez and Liam Wilson, both fighters who have defeats at the hand of Vaquero. So it was announced that this was going to be the interim. This was going to be for the WBO's interim title at 130, and the stakes were elevated, which made the fight even funner. It should have been a fun fight regardless, and I'm sure that the fight was going to play out the way that it did. But of course, the stakes being elevated a little bit seems to have added a little bit more fun to the fight, maybe a little bit more urgency to each fighter. If Vaquero is not successful, then he will come back to 130 more than likely and defend his current standing as the champion for the WBO, meaning that the winner of this fight was going to get a shot to run it back against Vaquero Navarrete. A slugfest / bloodbath between Navarrete and Oscar Valdez, where Navarrete got the best of Oscar Valdez and the decision win. And a slugfest between Liam Wilson and Navarrete, where they each did plenty of damage to one another, and Navarrete ended up coming out with the stoppage over Liam Wilson in their first outing. So the stakes were as high as you could get, just shy of a full version championship. and the fight delivered. It was an impressive fight where the story of the night for me was we ended up seeing a very similar Liam Wilson, who is tough as nails, comes forward, bites down on his mouth guard, and takes the fight to his opponents. Long, rangy, lands very good uppercuts, likes to walk his opponents down. Oscar Valdez, who we've been seeing, or at least trying to figure out in his last few fights, if Oscar Valdez has hit his ceiling as far as developmentally speaking. We've wondered if Oscar Valdez has reached his peak. And in the last few fights, we've seen a very similar Oscar Valdez approach each one of his last outings. But we have seen improvements as it relates to his stamina and his durability. The amount of punishment that he's able to withstand, that's always been something that you could rely on Oscar Valdez bringing to the table, because he's a durable fighter who fights with his heart, who fights full of emotion, and is not going to quit. He's not going to quit. He's going to keep coming forward and keep trying. And we've seen it in the past, whether he had a broken jaw or a broken nose or is just a bloody mess. He keeps coming forward and he keeps taking the fight to his opponents, even if it's in a losing effort. But his stamina has definitely improved, just in the sense that we're noticing a lot more combinations and a lot more action later on in the fight, rather than seeing Oscar Valdez slow down and start getting picked apart like it happened with Shakur Stevenson. We've seen, or even Robson Conceição, even though he did get the victory on that one. We didn't see it with Navarrete, and we didn't see it here. He is all action all the time, from opening bell to closing bell. He doesn't stop throwing. And this, you have to accredit it to the fact that since joining Eddie Reynoso and the Canelo team, it almost seems like, even though he was a very disciplined fighter before, he's completely turned it around to where he is pretty much in tip-top shape throughout the entire year now. So when the camps show up and it's time to start camp in preparation for his upcoming bout, it's almost apparent that the last thing he has to worry about is weight cutting. And now he just gets to worry about and focus fully on strategy and game plan, formulating a game plan for the opposition. Whereas before, he would deal with weight cut issues, which led him into that debacle and that controversy of the tainted tea that he ended up popping hot for. That's not the issue with Oscar Valdez anymore. He's in tip-top shape, which obviously the results are paying off in the ring, where he is durable and fully engaged and fully active in the second half of the fight, rather than seeing a Oscar Valdez that's starting to slow down, a diminished version of him. That was one of the things that I walked away with on this one. Of course, the fight didn't go into the late rounds. It ended in the 7th round. The second thing that I walked away from this was that Oscar Valdez's left hand is just piston-like. The left hand of Oscar Valdez was the story of the night. Not even worried about throwing many jabs. It was just power punches from beginning to end. He threw everything at Liam Wilson, and the majority of his punches and his output was delivered by his left hand. Whether it was left hooks to the temple, to the head, whether they were left hooks to the body, or left uppercuts, as he was returning what Liam Wilson was sending to him. Liam would land an uppercut, and Oscar Valdez would return it right back. And that's the story of the night, that I ended up noticing a fully developed left hand on behalf of Oscar Valdez. So, if the questions come to be that he's hit his peak or that he's reached his ceiling. There's still slight room for improvement there. And Eri Reynoso's, he's finding those nooks and crannies on where to improve his overall abilities. And he's finding success in doing so. Oscar Valdez, within the last minute, we're inside the final minute of the 7th round. He lands a beautiful left hook as Liam Wilson dropped his guard momentarily, and the hook lands clean on the button of Liam Wilson, staggers him back a couple steps, and Oscar Valdez just goes in for the kill. Started throwing everything at Liam Wilson. Liam Wilson's guard comes up. Starts protecting himself, hoping that the round would end. And Oscar Valdez, realizing that the clock is still ticking down, reaching the end of the 7th round, continues his ascension towards Liam Wilson and continues throwing everything at him and landing big power punches as he's walking Liam Wilson down. The clinch is attempted by Wilson, where the referee eventually breaks him up. Wilson still reaching for Valdez's hip. Valdez is leaning on Wilson's back of the head and his back, as Liam Wilson is leaning forward and bent forward. Ref breaks him apart. Valdez continues his attack, his assault on Wilson. And there must have been maybe inside of 15 seconds left in that 7th round, where Valdez manages to land 2 huge hooks, looping punches to the frontal lobe of Liam Wilson, one left, a follow-up right, and the referee had seen enough, jumps in, throws his arms around Liam Wilson, walks him to the ropes, and that was all she wrote, with Oscar Valdez dropping to his knees, displaying full emotion. In awe and happiness and relief as to what he had just accomplished, and once again getting a title around his waist. If he gets a chance to run it back with Navarrete, you know that arena is going to be jam-packed. The first go-around, legends Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales were on hand with their podcast, their very popular podcast, full on conducting interviews, being part of the press, being part of the lead up to the fight, being part of the press conference, being present ringside, as everybody deemed that this was going to be the new age of Barrera-Morales rivalry between Navarrete and Valdez. What we got in turn was a very entertaining fight. As I described it earlier, a slugfest / bloodbath, where they threw everything at each other. Oscar Valdez hit Navarrete with so many hard punches. Navarrete kept coming at Oscar Valdez, walking him down, walking through his punches. Oscar was a bloody mess, but would not stop fighting. And in the end, Navarrete had done enough to get the decision, but the people were on their feet, applauding both warriors. Should they face off against one another, this time with additional title implications? Last time, Valdez challenged Navarrete for his title. This time, it would be for a unification. since Valdez has a portion of it again. He's managed to keep himself up there and climb up once again. He's knocking on that door. If Navarrete is successful at 135 over Berinchik, then you could bet that he will more than likely vacate this 130-pound title. And Valdez will be elevated as a full version champion. Sitting front row at this event was none other than O'Shaquie Foster, your current WBC 130-pound champ. There was also Albert Bell that I mentioned on the preview episode, who was on hand at the weigh-ins, standing maybe about 15 feet away from me when I was present at the weigh-ins. Prince Bell, also undefeated himself, looking to get himself a title shot. So congratulations to Oscar Valdez. What an amazing, amazing victory. Amazing way to pull this fight out. And for Liam Wilson, back to the drawing board. But hell, he's going to be tough for anybody that steps into the ring with him. He's just your traditional Aussie fighter that loves to come forward, take the action to his opponents, and break them down. And he's obviously encountered retention when he faced Navarrete, and now with Oscar Valdez, where they've been willing to fight power with power, refusing to be broken down by the assault of Liam Wilson. Liam Wilson has found a lot of success with his style, so much that he's been able to get himself into 2 title fights. 2 major title fights. He's come short, but he's going to be headaches for anybody else that he faces. It's a very smothering style that Liam Wilson brings to the table, and he's going to be trouble for anybody else. I have no doubts about it. We'll see what the future holds for Oscar Valdez. I'm sure he's not going to do any or make any decisions until after that mid-May showdown with Navarrete and Berinchik takes place. So he sees where he stands currently, whether he's going to be the fully elevated full version champion at 130, or if he's going to remain the interim, which we would probably be looking for a showdown maybe around August or September with those 2 guys unifying that title. Awesome stuff in the 130-pound division. Lamont Roach earlier this year. O'Shaquie Foster. Navarrete about to be in action. Oscar Valdez already in there. Joe Cordina is about to be in action as well against Anthony Casacci as part of the undercard of Wilder Fury, also in May. Casacci bringing the IBO title, and Cordina bringing his version of the title, which is the... What does he have? He has the IBF, if I remember correctly. And Lamont Roach has the WBA. Great stuff at the 130-pound division. And we move on to the co-main event. The co-main event, and let me tell you guys something about what took place here at this co-main event. The co-main event ended up being an interesting one because it was fought between 2 women who have a huge following via social media, obviously because of their looks. That attracts a lot more attention, that has brought a lot more public and a bigger following for them. That has definitely helped. But don't be fooled by their looks, because they are beyond talented. And Seniesa SUPERBAD Estrada, who knows how to promote herself very well, has been on the up and up and has done some amazing things in the sport of boxing. In her young career, she already holds the fastest knockout in women's boxing history and possibly in professional boxing history. I believe when I did research as to who had the fastest knockout, it was an unsanctioned or an amateur fight that was listed as 4 seconds back in the day, 50, 60 years ago, if not more. Seniesa pulled that off against an unexperienced fighter by the name of Miranda Atkins, if I remember correctly. I hope I'm not messing up her name. And she pulled it off in 7 seconds. Well, that night was supposed to be the Seniesa Yokasta Valle fight. Never came to fruition. She continued her career, continued amassing victories and getting titles between 105 and 108. Seniesa did. Eventually came into a halt where she couldn't secure this fight with Valle that she wanted so much. That halt ended up in a contractual dispute and eventually parting ways with Golden Boy. Golden Boy turns around and becomes a co-promoter of Yokasta Valle. When Seniesa exits, Yokasta entered. The fight that could not be made, all of a sudden they have that fighter whom the contractual dispute was over under their banner. Seniesa was out of the scene for a while, gets signed by Top Rank, debuts for Top Rank, and then suffers an injury to her right hand, one that ended up resulting in surgery and keeping her out for, I believe, 8 months or so. The fight finally got signed, finally got made between Golden Boy and Top Rank, and these two, under different banners now, were going to get to face one another. A lot of disdain, a lot of bad feelings, and a lot of emotion leading up to this fight. I got the chance to speak to Yokasta Valle briefly after the weigh-ins on Thursday evening. I didn't get a chance to speak with Seniesa. If you haven't checked those interviews out, go check them out. I got pretty good content. I think you'll enjoy it, and pretty cool conversations with a lot of the fighters that were part of this card. Yokasta Valle, very, very humble, very straightforward, very willing to engage the press. And that's also one of the reasons why her popularity continues to grow, because she's so accessible. If you didn't know any better, this fight was and could have very well been the main event of the night. If you were there in person and you're listening to this, you know that what I'm saying and what I'm about to say is true. At the conclusion of the Seniesa and Yokasta Valle fight, a lot of the people exited the arena. I haven't seen what the final numbers were in attendance, but it felt like a jam-packed house. It was as loud as I could remember. Louder than the Sonny Edwards-Bam Rodriguez fight in December, with a larger attendance. And I hope I'm not wrong. It just felt that way. It was loud. In between rounds, in the lead up, as the ladies were walking into the ring. It was awesome. And everybody was fully engaged on this fight. You had people in the stands around me just commenting, along with my buddies who were in attendance with me. We're going back and forth. Who do you think got that round? Who do you think? I think Valle got that round. I think Valle is getting the best of Seniesa. I think the overall consensus in the crowd, and at least in the immediate sections, and when we were walking around our sections out in the lobby, was that Yokasta Valle had done enough to have secured the victory and to have been deemed the champion. It was a very tricky fight to judge. A lot of it had to do with the blood. Seniesa bringing 3 titles to the table, Yokasta bringing 2 titles to the table, all 5 titles on the line, and the winner was to be deemed the undisputed at 100, the first ever undisputed champion of 105 pounds. The minimum weight division. The story of the fight, 2 stories or 2 narratives that we could walk away with from the fight. No knockdowns, but the 2 narratives are On behalf of Seniesa, the footwork, her punch selection, her creativity, her delivery is what got her the victory. On behalf of Yokasta, the fact that she bit down on that mouth guard, took the fight to Seniesa, and walked her down for the majority of the fight. The cut that took place in the first round hindered Yokasta Valle, where she had partial visibility because it continued to bleed the entire night. One thing that we were all mentioning when we were in the stands was that on the big screen, you could see the corner trying to do their best. I'm not even going to say the cut man because I don't think that was a cut man that was on Yokasta Valles' corner. Whoever it was on Valles' team trying to repair that cut, and you could see that they're just rubbing the cut back and forth with the swab and the Vaseline not sticking, the Vaseline rolling off. Just a horrible job at tending to that cut. It was unexpected for the corner. One that when the fight ended, both Yokasta Valle and her coach, Gloria Alvarado, also known as Coach G, claimed that it was intentionally done by Seniesa Estrada. Seniesa was asked about this post-fight, where she said, no, our styles basically lent for that to take place, especially in the first round, as they were both full of energy and trying to figure out each other's spacing and just clashing whenever they would go forward. The fact that both of them were leaning forward with their heads when they would deliver their punches caused that initial clash, which resulted in a nasty cut on behalf of Yokasta Valles, or that Yokasta Valles suffered on the outside of her right eye, her right brow. The narrative that cut was done intentionally, we got to put to rest. And I'll tell you why. Seniesa was absolutely correct when she made that assessment after the fight, that it was their styles. And the reason I'm saying that is because there were numerous head clashes throughout the fight. There were multiple head clashes in that first round, one which resulted in the nasty cut. There was a head clash in round 2. There was a head clash in round 4. And those are the most vivid ones that I remember. That I remember saying, oof, they just bashed heads again. I would have to rewatch the fight, and I bet you that if you just recently watched the fight, or if you go back and rewatch it and you pay attention to what I'm telling you, you're probably going to catch several other head clashes in the later rounds, mid to later rounds. But those are the ones that I vividly remember. So when she said that, I agreed. Because it's true. Their styles and the way that they were attacking whenever they would lean forward with their heads, whenever they were about to unleash their punches on one another. And that caused the head clashes. Now, how accurate was Seniesa and the CompuBox numbers? Because Seniesa's footwork, as good a footwork, it was very appealing and very appeasing to the eye, the fact that she was boxing in and out, forward and back, lateral movement, delivering her punches. And what I was saying at the beginning, her punch selection and her combinations were definitely captivating to the eye. However, she tends to loop her punches so much so that her center stays open, her face, her chin stays fully open, and Seniesa, when she's doing that on her way out or on her way on her reset from her punches, Yokasta would find the openings down center. Yokasta was throwing straight jabs, straight punches, 1-2s as she would walk down Seniesa. Seniesa would be moving out to a side. Yokasta would throw down center and catch Seniesa on the way out. That's what was catching the eye of the sections and the people that were around me, where they kept saying the consistency of work that Yokasta was doing and the fact that she was landing so clean on Seniesa, it seemed as if she was taking the fight. She was being the most dominant fighter. But the blood continued to trickle down her face, and you could see how that could definitely play a part with the judges. That, along with the punch selection from Seniesa, as it was definitely more appealing to the eye. It seemed as if she was doing more than she really was. Seniesa got caught a couple times. I don't remember seeing Seniesa hurt at any moment, but I do remember seeing her staggered a couple times. And that was during exchanges when they would cross each other. One would come in with the looping left, the other one with the looping right, and they would catch each other. Says one would catch the chin. Seniesa, on one specific time that I remember, Seniesa got caught on the right side of her chin as she landed on the cheekbone of Yokasta, on the right side of Yokasta's face, where the blood was trickling down on. And that those type of exchanges happened several times, maybe too few for Yokasta, but those were hard punches, and those are some of the harder punches that I remember. I remember the 11th round, Seniesa was actually doing some of her best work, even toying with Yokasta at one point, mocking her as if she was the bullfighter, baiting her in, and continue to land some punches successfully. By the close of the fight, Yokasta ended up catching, and I think even at the close of the same round, Yokasta closed in on the distance and had Seniesa towards the ropes and landed some great punches, some awesome punches on Seniesa, which left an impression on the crowd, and surely it should have left an impression on the judges as well. When it was all said and done, Seniesa Estrada was announced as the winner and the newly crowned Undisputed Champion at 105 pounds. The newly crowned Undisputed Women's Champion to date. The most recent person that we saw accomplish that was Katie Taylor when she just lifted the titles from Cameron in their rematch. Now we have Seniesa as your newest undisputed champ in the women's division, in women's boxing. Her plans seem to be to move up to 108 and possibly accomplish the same, or maybe even go as high as 112 and try to rematch, get a big money fight type rematch against Marlon Esparza, who still holds a title around her waist at this time. A very big fight that garnered a lot of attention, and you could say or credit that fight as the one that catapulted the career of that performance against Marlon Esparza, was the catalyst and the one that catapulted Seniesa Estrada's into stardom. When the fight ended, I remember asking people that were around me, where people started clapping, everybody was on their feet waiting for the decision to be rendered, and The people in the back row directly behind me and my buddies who were sitting right in front of me, I'm asking them, they're all saying, Valle got this, Valle got this. And I'm telling them, if the decision goes to Seniesa, are you going to think it's a robbery? And nobody answered. I'm like, you guys got to pick because they're gonna read it out. Do you guys think it's a robbery if they give it to Seniesa? And they're like, Valle got this. But nobody would answer that. The reason I was asking that was to see like how far apart do you see this? Because if it's that close, that closely scored of a fight, if it was that tight in your minds, but your feelings are leaning towards Yokasta Valle, you may very well be disappointed if it goes to Seniesa. But if it's that tight of a fight, if it's that closely contested, which I felt that it was, then you got to be okay with the decision going one way or the other. As long as the scorecards are not miles apart, where they're scoring landslides for one fighter over the other. That's where the disputes come and where the claims come of robbery, corruption, and so forth. I thought it was a super entertaining fight. And to touch once again on the point that I was making, that when this fight ended, you just saw the crowds head up to the lobby in preparation for the Oscar Valdez fight, for the main event to take place. But then you're seeing a lot of the crowds exit the arena. A lot of them might have thought that that was the main event because it was that hype. It was that hyped up in there during the Seniesa and Yokasta fight that a lot of people might have thought that that was the main event. A lot of people may have just shown up for that. That was their main event and weren't interested in the Oscar Valdez. Nonetheless, there was still a big showing, obviously. It's not like the arena was empty. There was still huge amounts of people left for the Oscar Valdez, Liam Wilson, and it was loud as heck when that fight was going on because it was just an action-packed fight, a fan-friendly style fight. But the reason I'm pointing that out is not in detriment of the main event, but it's in awe and an appreciation of how many people actually are starting to turn the page and get behind this evolution that we've been witnessing of women's boxing in the last few years. This not resurgence, but more so arrival of women's boxing because of the way that they're fighting now, the way that they're presenting themselves, the way that they're promoting themselves, the accomplishments that these women are having. Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Claressa Shields, Michaela Mayer, Alicia Baumgartner, now Seniesa, Marlon Sparsa, out in the Olympics. Cecilia Brakis and Jessica McCaskill. Seniesa is one of your most notorious, one of your most outspoken fighters who carries her heart on her sleeve and speaks full of emotion each and every single interview and every presentation. And you got to appreciate that. She's not a dirty talker. She's not a dirty fighter, not a disrespectful one. She just says and tells it like it is and says what's on her mind. And it's refreshing. Elsewhere on the card, to close this episode out, by the way, if you have a chance, go check out the YouTube channel. It's still growing. I get it. It's still growing. I don't have a lot of content on there, but I managed to get some good interviews. I think you'll enjoy them. Richard Torres knocked out Donald Hainsworth. I've been following Richard Torres, and those of you that have been following me from day one, you guys know that I was very lengthy when I was covering the Olympics, where Richard Torres ended up making it to the final and fighting Jalilov in the final match for the gold medal. Richard Torres came short in that one, got the silver medal. But again, I brought it up during the interview when I'm talking to him that he was fighting. If I recall correctly, Richard Torres with his knockout over Hainsworth, he just got his 9th victory overall. Well, when he fought in the Olympics as an amateur, fighting Jalolov, this Jalolov boxer had the same record or a similar record to what Richard Torres currently has now as a professional. So I brought that up in the interview with him. I'm like, I can't believe that you were stepping up against that level of opposition and you took the fight to him. You came up short, didn't get the gold medal, but you still are a silver medalist representing the United States, literally fighting against all odds because you were fighting an 8-0 pro who was representing his country in the Olympics against an amateur in Richard Torres. And he still gave him a hell of a fight. Richard Torres just turned 9-0 now. Jalolov is like at least 10 fights over, or several fights ahead of Richard Torres in their pro careers. That's crazy to me. That disparaging level is allowed. That gap in boxing levels is allowed in the Olympics. So congrats to Richard Torres, and grateful that he gave me a few minutes of his time to be able to talk to me. And we had a little fun with that interview. I wanted to poke a little fun respectfully because I follow him on social media, and he's a funny guy, man. If you follow him on social media, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Somebody else that I ran into is a young prospect who's definitely making his mark. He's a heavy-handed, quick-footed, lightning type delivery as it relates to his punching. And this young fighter is known as Kid Kansas Alan Garcia. Super impressed with him. There's a video out there, and I brought it up during the interview with him. There's a video out there of an amateur fight that he ended up having against, where he got the short end of the decision, even though I thought that he may have done enough to pull that victory on that day. And it was a fight between Alan Garcia and Xander Zayas. Xander Zayas is now competing at junior middleweight or super welterweight, 154 pounds. Kid Kansas competes at lightweight at 135 pounds. So Alan Garcia and Xander Zayas ran into each other in the amateurs, and it was a hell of a fight where they threw everything at each other and in quick succession. Fast hands during that fight. Well, Alan Garcia still has fast hands, fast delivery, and his punching power is, as Tim Bradley has expressed several times and described in his last few fights, he describes it as gunfire. When his punches land, there's just a pop to them. There's a smack that just, you hear it. And sure enough, when you're in the stands, you hear his punches landing, and you're just like, oof, that was hard. He's got the pop. And he's going to be someone that you should definitely get familiar with, because I think that he's got a lot of promise behind him. I really do. Similar to that of Emiliano Vargas, who's also a legendary, the son of the legend Fernando Vargas, who is also campaigning in that same division and actually faced an opponent by the last name of Hampton, a former opponent who has a defeat at the hands of Alan Garcia of Kid Kansas. This was the first time that Emiliano Vargas goes to decision, I believe, if I'm correct. So he goes to decision with the former foe of Alan Garcia, whom Alan Garcia dispatched. That's going to be a cool showdown if we ever get Alan Garcia and Emiliano Vargas in the ring together. And then Lindolfo Delgado is another one who you should keep an eye out for. And this guy is someone, yes, Richard Torres, Emiliano Vargas, Garcia, Kit Kansas. But Lindolfo Delgado is one that really impressed me. I also got a chance to catch up with him and talk to him briefly because the intrigue behind his matchup this past week was a former teammate of his from the Olympic national team when they represented Mexico was stepping in the ring with them. They knew each other very well. And you knew that this was going to be an intriguing matchup, as it always is, between two former sparring partners, two former teammates. Whatever facet those rivalries ever present themselves, you know that they usually lend themselves to be intriguing matchups, and this was no exception. However, we saw Lindolfo Delgado just display levels as he's maturing into the professional ranks. He remains undefeated, and he is developing into a well-rounded, scary version of a fighter. He has an answer for everything. He's great at countering. He doesn't abandon his height. He doesn't fight at the opponent's. He doesn't fight down to the opponent's level. He uses every bit of his height. He uses every bit of his reach. He doesn't abandon his game plan. He reminds me a lot. He's imposing in the way that he fights. And he reminds me a lot of Camarón Cepeda. He reminds me a lot of like Joseph Parker as well, out in the heavyweights, who is just blue collar. I'm here to work. I'm here to deliver my game plan. I do not sway from it. Let's do work. That's Lindolfo Delgado. Undefeated 140-pounder who is quickly becoming one of the biggest threats in the 140-pound division, a stacked division. I would love to see Lindolfo Delgado match up against Arnold Barboza. That would be an amazing, amazing showdown between those two. That's how good he is and underrated at the moment. But if he keeps delivering the type of fights and the type of performances that he's putting together, keep an eye out on Lindolfo Delgado, as this guy is just around the corner. Yes, the other prospects that I'm mentioning, they're on their way up. Lindolfo Delgado is right there. And he's going to be one of those fighters that because you don't know his name or you haven't paid attention to his career, he's going to end up as the opponent to any one of these champions or anyone that's knocking on the door of a title shot, and he's going to upset him. You're going to end up putting your money on the wrong guy because you don't recognize Lindolfo Delgado, and you're going to end up on the losing end of that bet. He's that impressive. So with that amazing, amazing experience out in Glendale, Arizona, once again, whenever I have a chance to shoot out there to Phoenix, if I get a chance to shoot out to Southern California, if I get a chance to shoot out to Vegas, anywhere in that Western region, Southwest region, I do my best to try to get to those fights when I can. I just love the atmospheres in those regions, and amazing card that they put out there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, a lengthy one, but a necessary one, because there was a lot to talk about on this card. So congrats to all the fighters, congrats to the fans, because they continue to show up in droves in huge fashion and represent out there in the Phoenix area. And I continue to say it, Phoenix to me is quickly becoming a new hub for major fights and major sports organizations. The Final Four is going to be hosted out there, NCAA Final Four. That's going to be hosted out there in Phoenix as well at the Cardinal Stadium. And the UFC shows up, and Eddie Hearn's been promoting their Golden Boy, now Top Rank. man, it's quickly becoming a fight haven and a fight hub to recognize at a world level. So I leave you guys with that. Thank you guys again for all the love, for continuing to tune in, and I'll catch you guys all on one of these many recaps that we gotta put out, because there was a lot of action that took place this past weekend. So I leave you guys with that. Thank you guys again. Much love sent your way. Have yourselves a great evening. Take care.